Hello, welcome to my channel once again, and the name remains Kwaku the Tech Guy, and the show is Tech Talk Podcast, and the official YouTube name is Wired for Tech Podcast. So today I've picked one of the domains that we talked about in previous episodes and see how we can practice it, and the domain name is database management. So basically, database is a collection of related information and they're stored in a relational database management system. That is the common tool for storing database, even though we have other tools like NoSQL, MongoDB, and so on and so forth. But in this tutorial, we're going to look at SQL, Microsoft SQL Relational Database Management System. We're going to look at how we can create basic SQL. SQL is, or SQL, some call it SQL, or SQL is the same. So it's a structured query language which is used to manipulate data in a relational database management system. And we're going to look at the basic usage of SQL that cuts across all relational database management systems, which is the CRUD. That is C-R-U-D. C stands for create, R stands for retrieve, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. So without wasting my time, let's hop onto the PC and do the practicals. Okay, so what you see now is a Microsoft SQL server, which is the Express version. Express version is a lightweight version which you can use for practice or to create minimal projects. Actually, Microsoft has two versions of Microsoft SQL Server, the enterprise version and also the free version, which is called Express, that can be used for personal projects and stuff. Right, so as I said, we're going to look at the CRUD function in SQL, or how to do a simple CRUD in SQL. So the C stands for create, how we can create either a database or a table in SQL. So we will look at creating a database in SQL. And SQL, as I said, is a language, it's a scripting language for manipulating data, a relational database management system. And in SQL, to create a database, the database is the instance where you create your tables to store your records, right? So you just write the create database syntax followed by the name that you want to give to the database. So I'll call this Tech Talk _DB, meaning Tech Talk database. Right, so this, when I run this code, you just double click on it and click on execute. And it says what command completed successfully. So when I refresh the part that shows all the databases created in this system, so let's see. Yeah, it's here, Tech Talk DB. So now we have our database, and anytime that you create a database, it comes with some folders under it. And today our focus will be on the table folder. This is where, when you create a table, is put, or it comes under or inside this folder. And a table is simply used to store records in a column and row form. If you are familiar with Excel spreadsheet, you know Excel stores data in a column and row form. The same thing applies to SQL tables in relational database management system. So tables hold the records, and so tables has fields that holds the record. So once we have created our database, we can create our table. So I'll call it creating a table, right? So you use the create table syntax as well. Let me pull this down a little. All right, so create table syntax followed by the name of the table. So we will call this tech talk underscore TBL. You don't need to leave spaces in between two words. If you want to use two words in SQL, you either put them together, or either like this, or with the small letter, or you use an underscore. You can't use a dash, so it's either underscore. You don't have to leave spaces between names in relational database. Okay, then followed by our brackets. Okay, so now that we have written the table, create table syntax, we need to create the fields that we want to store records into. So the fields will be, we will have an ID field which will uniquely identify each column, each row in a table. Then let's say maybe we will have the first name, the last name, email, contact, then maybe and DOB. So these are the fields that we will need in our table. Right, so you just need to drop down here, then you type ID. But then in creating a table, or in creating a database, or a table in a database, you need to specify column data types. So data types are simply the kind of data that you want to store in a particular field. So for instance, IDs will store numbers. So the data type for numbers in SQL is called integer. So you just use the short form int. Then we move to, well, because we want the ID column to uniquely identify the row and also to be in an auto incremental manner, we have to pass those keywords as well, and we call those as what? Constraints. So constraints are set on fields to ensure data integrity. Right, so first of all, I'll call it a primary key. So the primary key constraint here will ensure that the ID is a primary key that is unique. When one row is given the ID 1, the next row cannot have an ID 1 again. It has to be 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is unique numbers. Then we want it to be auto incremental. Auto incremental means it should be 1, 2 plus, that's plus 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And in SQL, in Microsoft SQL, we call it identity into brackets 1, 1. That is identity incremental 1 by 1. Okay, then okay, it's supposed to be identity 1 by 1. That means 1 plus 1. Okay, so now we will create our next column, which is the first name column. So F name means first name. Then names are in text, or can be in text, or a combination of text and special characters like hyphen. So the data type for name is varchar, and variable character data type in SQL takes a certain number of characters. It takes 255 characters. So we have to provide a number of characters that is required. So we will assume that the longest name will have 50 characters. So in order not to waste space. Okay. Then comma. Okay, so the first name, if we want it to be mandatory, we can add the not now constraint to it, which will ensure that the first name is not skipped. Okay, so I'll just make copy and paste and change this to L. which is the last name. So the last name also follows the principle of the first name. Then this will be contact or phone number. Okay. Then the phone number too is required, but then we will assume that the maximum phone number is 15 characters. Then followed by the last column, which is DOB, that's date of birth, and date of birth takes the date data type. Yeah, so it's very necessary to set the various data types that is required per field, and also set constraints which will ensure data integrity. Then after the last column, you don't need to bring comma. So this ends our table creation. So when I run this command, let me run the command and see what happens. Or run the script. There's already an object name. Yeah, I think I created the table initially. So let me just, okay, there's a problem here. The problem is that, after creating the database, I should have selected it in this box. That is why we are not seeing the table that we created in this table folder, because the database that we are working on is called TalkDB. So we have to click here, then come to the drop down box here and choose TalkDB. Before, when we run this script, it will create the table in the TalkTalk database. Else we could have added the database name to the table. So let me run this again. It says command completed successfully. So I'll refresh this. Then we open the table folder again. You see that the table is created here nicely. So to check what is inside the table, we will use the retrieve. So the R in the CRUD retrieve, that's the R, or select. So select is the statement or the syntax used to query data from a table in a database. So I'll just write a basic select or script or query to select records from the table. So the table name is TalkTalk TBL, right? So this is a basic select all query that selects all records from a table in a database. But currently our table doesn't have any records, so we get an empty table as the response. So now let's look at the U, which is updates. But then still, since we don't have any data or we've not inserted any records in the table, let's do that by using the insert statement. So instead, insert statement is used to insert records into a table. So it's just like creating, yeah. So with the insert syntax, so what are we inserting? We are inserting into, yeah, so it's supposed to be insert into. So we are inserting into the TalkTalk table. So we have to call the table that we are inserting records into. Then what are we inserting? We are inserting into some columns. So the column should be in brackets, followed by the values that we are inserting. Okay, so this is a single way of inserting records. So first of all, we will call the ID, but because we did identity 1,1, that means we've created an auto incremental function on the ID column. So we will leave the ID field. Then we go straight to the first name, L name, then contact and DOB. So since the ID column has the auto incremental constraint, the IDs will be created automatically for us. So we don't need to add or call that column in the insert statement. Then the values are what we are inserting. So I will call maybe Kwaku Dapa. So the first name is Kwaku, last name Dapa. Then the contact 02422222874. Then the date. So the date to in SQL, the date should have this format. I'll just put any date there. So 2016 dash maybe 06-26. Right. So why we are putting all of them inside quotation marks is that they are text, and text should be in quotation marks. I think we have 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4. So what is the problem here that we have? Insert into TikTok TBL F name. What's the error? Incorrect syntax near. So what is the incorrect syntax here? I think there should be values. No. Yeah. Okay, it's supposed to be values, right? So this is a single way of inserting records. We can also do multiple insertions, but let me do this first. So when I run this, it says one row affected. That means we've inserted one row of column. Let's run the basic select statement again. Now we have our records created. Then the ID has a value of 1. Okay, so I'll try a multi-insertion. And with multi-insertion, all that you need to do is you just have to provide. Let me copy this, put it here. Okay, and I'll do one more. Right, so we are inserting 3 records. This will be, let's say, Kwajo Bonsu. Then we just change the number to maybe 054. Then the date of birth, we change it to a different date of birth. Then the second one will be maybe Frida Mensah. Then we change the number to maybe 050. Then the date of birth to something else apart from what we have. Okay, then the third name, we call it maybe Peter Owusu. Okay, then maybe the name, the phone number is 054. Then we change the date of birth to something else. Okay, so this is how we can insert multiple records. So every record should be separated with a comma, with the exception of the last one. So let me run this. 3 rows affected. Now let's run the basic select statement again. Okay, so all our records are created with an incremental ID number. So basically, this is how you can create, retrieve, and also insert records into an SQL. So quickly, let's look at updating records. That's the U. So the U is updating records. Let's assume that maybe we want to update one of the records that we have. So we can use the update statement. So update, then we call the table that we want to update. Then we set the column. So which column are we updating? Okay, let's update the first name of ID 4. So set the column which is F name. We want to set it equal to let's say units. We want to balance it, so we have 2 males then 2 females. But here, when I run this query, everything, all the first names will be updated to Eunice. So we have to specify the ID that we want to update. So we use a clause called where. So where the ID is equal to 4. So by this, we are telling SQL that we want to update the first name of the ID 4 or the person with ID 4. So let's run this and see what we get. One role affected. Let's run the basic select statement. Yes. So you see it updated only Eunice. I repeat again, if you don't add the clause and you just run the code up to this point, all the records, all the first names will be changed to Eunice. So finally, let's look at the last one, which is delete. So delete is used to delete records. So we can delete, let's say, delete from table where ID is equal to, let's say, 4. So delete from this table, then we specify. Else, if we run up to this point, everything will be deleted from the table. So where clause is a clause that tells SQL the exact row that you want to delete. So we are deleting row ID 4. Okay, let me run this. Yeah, successful. So now let's do the basic selection again, and we see that we now have 3 records. When you insert new records, it will skip to 5. But if you want you want to get sequential numbers again, then you have to truncate the table. That means delete everything from the table using the truncate statement. Right. So basically, this is how CRUD works in SQL. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel, or you can follow me. Share the video for others to also like. If you are watching on YouTube, click on the notification bell so that you get notification of new videos. If you are watching on TikTok too, like the video, add it to your favorites, and also follow the channel so that we grow and learn together. The name still remains Kwaku the Tech Guy, and you are in the channel Wired for Tech Podcast. See you in the next video. Bye.